And okay. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm Milene Aguiar from Tartar International. Julian Tartan and I will be hosting this webinar today. Welcome, Alan. Please, if you would like to introduce yourself and start your presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Milene. I appreciate the opportunity to present here, and I appreciate everybody that signed up to join. My name is Alain Lalonde. I'm with Mueller Water Products. I am the regional sales manager for the Canadian market. I'm part of a new group within the Mueller organization called the Water Management Solutions Group. We deal with the HydroGuard, Ecologics, and Singer Valve product line. Those are three key product lines that help the infrastructure, which I'm going to talk about during this presentation. I've been in the water industry for over 25 years. I've kind of capped it at 25. It's more than 25, but I'm kind of always saying 25 plus. Don't want to give away my age. But I've been around and I see some familiar names that are signed up to this conference. So some of you have seen me present before. So I'm going to go over hopefully something that's useful. It's a three-part series on the solution here. So I'm going to just start sharing my screen. You bear with me and start the presentation. Okay, everything looks okay, Melanie?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Very good. Well, once again, I wanted to thank the AWWA Water Loss Specialist Group. I'm actually a member of the AWWA Water Loss Specialist Group, have been for many years. It's a great team of experts, very good group that shares a lot of information on water loss together. My presentation is titled Making Our Old Pipes New Again. And it's actually the second part of a three-part series. The first part was given last Friday by my colleague based in Singapore, Mark Nicol. Later this week on Wednesday, Joe Finn will be presenting his part, which deals with the European perspective. Mark Nicol did the Asia Pacific region. And I'm bringing together today the North American perspective of making our old pipes new again. I do want to say that don't let the title fool you. This isn't a presentation about ripping out old pipes and putting new pipes in the ground. That's only one component. Obviously, we do have to renew our pipes, but we need to figure out exactly what our pipes are doing in the ground, because some of our old pipes are actually kind of new, and we don't necessarily have to change them. I'm going to go through that during my perspective, or during my presentation. So obviously, this is the water operator's worst nightmare. These types of events is what we're trying to avoid, eliminate, because rest assured, this guy who's on the telephone is not talking to his wife about figuring out if he needs to bring some milk at home. He's definitely probably on the call with the mayor, a councillor, a director, trying to resolve this issue. So if we can have better knowledge in our system, we can avoid these nightmares. Now, as a Canadian, this is my worst nightmare. This is an actual picture taken from my bedroom this morning as I woke up to start my day. So here we are, May 11th in Canada, and we're still seeing some snow. So a little bit of humor in there. That's my worst nightmare. I do not like seeing snow in May. When Mark Nicol, myself, and Joe kind of teamed up and discussed what we were going to talk about and the different perspectives, we soon realized that what utilities face out there as their global challenges are the same worldwide. How we go about it and how we work with it is different. But we're all dealing with the effect of emergency repairs and damages caused by breaks. We're all dealing with increasing regulations around water loss management. We're all worried about the allocation of resources and how we're going to be able to maintain our water distribution system. And one of the big factors, obviously, is where is the available funding and where are we going to get all this money to renew the assets that we know we have to renew in the ground? So that's the global challenge. And in North America, if you look at it from a North American perspective, we're definitely living that right now. Recent study by Stephen Folkman in 2018 shows that there's an increase in breaks of 27% between 2012 and 2018. And that's even worse when you get to deal with cast iron and asbestos cement pipes. You might think, why am I putting a median age factor in there? Well, if you look, the median age of water engineering managers is much higher than the rest of the average population or work population out there. So there's a lot of knowledge that's about to retire. So it's really important for utilities to take that knowledge and make sure that they get that knowledge out of those water operators, because as those water operators leave, the new managers, the new engineers coming up behind them are going to be faced with a real challenge at replacing and renewing these pipes in the ground. And if we look at managing our pipe renewal, it's a real balancing act, because we want to be able to extend the asset life if we can. If we're able to make the asset live a little longer and not have to replace it, obviously there's a benefit to that. But we also know that at one point we have to renew our assets. And if we look at the group that deals with these, asset life extension, there's a lot of water loss, real loss management programs that are out there, and they tend to help at extending the asset life. On the renewal side, it's really the asset management department and municipalities that kind of dictate the capital improvement programs and the budgets associated with that. And what I've seen in my experience is that because those guys are on either side of the balance, they often don't share the data. And there's definite synergies between those two groups that need to be shared and need to be discussed, because the information of one or the actions of one affect the other one. And the information gathered by one is very useful for the other group to make decisions. So if you look at on the real loss management side, those of you that are familiar with the IWA and AWWA water loss methodologies are very familiar with this particular graph. So when you're looking to reduce leakage in a distribution system, you're looking to do 4 key things. Obviously, you need to go out and do your active leakage control. So you need to go out there and be active at finding leaks. Once you find them, you have to repair them. Obviously, you have to do it in a timely fashion and with quality repair materials so that the leaks are controlled properly. And then there's pressure management. Obviously, if you're able to manage the pressure, the stresses on your distribution system, you're able to reduce the level of loss. Pressure management is really one of the key factors to help extend the asset life in your distribution system. But last but not least, there's pipeline asset management. Because at one point, there's just so many Band-Aids that we can put on a distribution pipe, we have to replace it at one point. But you have to do all 4 of these components in harmony. And the harmony is a little different system to system, depending how you're made up, what the condition are in your particular distribution system. But obviously, some of us, I was one of them, was a purist on the leak detection side from the start of my career. I didn't pay much attention to the pipeline asset management group. Now that I'm with Mueller and I'm paying more attention, I see better the synergies between that. And there's a lot of information from the water loss that needs to feed into your pipeline asset management component and vice versa. Obviously, to help us, we have our M36 manual here in North America, the Water Audits and Loss Control Program manual, to help us prioritize programs to do these 4 key pillars to reduce our real loss management distribution system. When you look at asset management managers, well, they're dealing with determining the right amount of condition assessment to do on their distribution and transmission piping so that they can make very informed decision on their capital improvement programs. So they're looking at it from a different perspective. So they're using varying tools to get the information that they need. And obviously it can start with a simple desktop model or using new software programs We'll talk a bit more about some software programs that use AI and machine learning to help evaluate your system. And why we're dealing with an inverted pyramid is that as you work down the pyramid, the risk associated with doing the various inspection methodologies and also the cost with doing these various inspection methodology increases. So you want to apply it on a smaller proportion of your system and stop at the point where you have sufficient data to make your decisions. And in North America, to help us deal with the condition assessment, there is the new M77 manual that's out there that talks about the inverted pyramid method and goes into great details with all of the different condition assessment methodologies that are out there in the marketplace. And all of it is to get enough information to make decisions with respect to replacing, rehabilitating, renewing our pipelines. And as you see here, the last box is also gaining enough information to find out that the pipes are in moderate good condition, and that the best approach is to continue to your water loss, real loss management and monitoring. So that's the tie between the asset management group back to the water loss group. And it's all about reducing the risk of failures and avoiding the need for capital replacement of pipes, and only doing it on the pipes that truly need to be replaced out there. So hopefully that ties the two, the water loss side and the asset management side. On a go-forward basis, I'm going to deal more with the asset management side, and the case study that I'm going to present, it will be more on the asset management side, but I'll continue to make ties on how that information works well with the leak and real loss management side of things. And of course, to help us make decisions on which rehabilitation method to use, we have the M22 manual from AWWA that can help us make those particular decisions of what class of rehabilitation, or whether we should go to full pipeline replacement. So when you look at making decisions, obviously if you don't have sufficient information, you can make the wrong decision. And one of our customers, Fred Pfeiffer, who's the Water Network Asset Strategy Manager with WSSC, he said this once to us, and it really stuck with us, and we've been using it in our presentation since. WSSC were at a point where they know they were making decisions, pulling out good pipe. And to Fred Pfeiffer, if you're replacing good pipe, it's just like digging up money and then throwing it away. Because obviously there's still asset life, there's still value to that asset. So making sure you go out and get the right level of information so that you make a more informed decision and make sure you make the right decision with renewing your pipes is very important. And if we look here at the correlation here, this is actual data from WSSC. So what we plotted here is year of installation of pipeline with the actual leakage rate of those particular pipelines in leaks per 100 miles per year. And if you put a straight line analysis through that data, you see that there's absolutely no correlation. So just basing strictly on age is not the best thing to do. So a lot of utilities out there said, okay, I want to reduce my leakage rate in the distribution system. So obviously I'm going to go out and tackle and replace my oldest pipes in the system. Well, this graph just goes to show you that if you go and tackle just the oldest pipes, you may not have the desired impact on reducing the water loss rates in your distribution system. So you need to go make more informed decisions and decide on which pipes you should tackle first. So we know as utilities now, and many of my customers have told me that their current decision-making matrix has reached a point where they're pulling out good pipe. When we first started down the asset management road, I mean, it's very easy for utilities to know the first 2-3% of really, really bad pipes. It's a no-brainer to pick up that low-hanging fruit and go out and replace bad pipe. But when we get into the middle, then we do not know whether we should be replacing street A before street B if we don't have evidence-based information. So we have data. We have a lot of data. And that's where some of the desktop modeling tools are out there. So we have data and we're trying to make decisions based on age of pipe and type of soil and break history, and we're making rules and we're trying to organize that particular data so that we get actionable results. Well, now we need a lot of tools, and there are tools out there to really help and improve our decision-making process for analytical analysis of historical data. And that's where these new software tools, one that I'll talk about a little bit is Pipe Insights. It's a new machine learning tool that's out there to be able to quickly analyze a whole slew of data. Data is not the issue. We have tons of data. Interpreting what that data means, seeing trends in that data, and identifying ways to manage those trends to have better information and more actionable information is where we need the help of machine learning tools. So by learning from the pipe's behaviors, we're able to predict the likelihood of failure, and we're able to improve the data from these analysis models so that we can make clear decisions moving forward on what to do next with our particular pipes. So if we look at Pipe Insights and machine learning algorithms in general, there's tons of utility data. So data will have GIS, they'll have pipe installation date, they'll have break history. The majority of utilities out there have gone into the digital world and have that type of information digitally. There's also a lot of public information that's out there, soil surveys, historical weather, things of that nature. And then of course, each tool will have their own proprietary data sets and algorithms. And then they'll run all that data together to try and identify patterns. And from that will come out the most likely pipes to fail. And with that, now we can identify the top 4, 5, 10, 15% of pipes that are likely to fail, and then make decisions on those particular pipes to either get condition assessment data on it or look at replacement or whether we should do leakage monitoring. But at least now we know the worst pipes in our particular system. So again, Pipe Insight takes raw data. Raw data is easy. We have tons of raw data, lots of internal data source from the utility, external data sources, and then by using the algorithm, taking that information, we can develop a likelihood of failure. Most softwares and Pipe Insights has the ability to add consequence of failure. So now you can add rules to give you consequence of failure. So you can multiply your consequence of failure with your likelihood of failure and get an even better ranking of pipes to prioritize. And now you've got actionable insights with that particular data. You're able to straight away, if you've got a very high likelihood of failure and a very high consequence of failure, you probably can't live with that, and you might make a decision to renew that pipe right away. But on the other ones that have less consequence of failure but a high likelihood of failure, you might go out and get condition assessment data on those pipes because you want to make a more informed decision of which pipes to replace first. And then the other pipes that have a lower risk of failure and consequence of failure, you can look at monitoring for leak detection, either permanent monitoring or routine leak detection surveys to be able to stay on top of those particular pipes as they degrade and move up in time. So we'll look at one little case study that Pipe Insights worked on. It's not that little, it's actually a fairly large utility with 4,600 miles of pipe. So what Pipe Insight did is they looked at about 10 years of historical data to predict the likelihood of failure of pipes in 2018. And the outcome of that particular analysis showed that 17 out of the top 18 pipes that were identified as likely to fail actually did fail in 2018. And then the 18th pipe, which was actually the #1 ranking, failed 2 months into 2019. So obviously this gives you more accurate data on your pipes and making decisions moving forward. This utility was Tucson Water. So they saw a new way of doing business with this particular data. And now we're more confident at moving down into condition assessment, leak detection monitoring, and actually pipe replacement decision making. So now if you take that same data that I showed from WSSC, but now you have other factors. You have actually gone out there and collected actual evidence-based condition information on the pipelines. You have age, you have soil conditions, and you develop a pipe integrity rating system. In WSSC, they've developed a rating system that includes some of our condition assessment values between 1 and 5. And now when you plot the rating versus the leakage, you see a clear trend. Obviously, the more degraded pipes have the higher leakage rate. That's a no-brainer. Of course, we know that. But identifying those high degraded pipes is really the difficult thing. But with good pipe insights, good information, evidence-based information, we can rank our pipes, and now we can target the 4s and the 5s and do our replacement or our renewal programs. And we know we're actually going to have a longer lasting effect on our water loss levels and our real loss levels in our distribution system. We can also target the pipes that should look at leakage monitoring, and we can identify the pipes that can be deferred for several years before we even need to consider what needs to be done. So with that, I'm going to specifically talk about a case study. It's called the Region Peel case study, dealing with how they approached condition assessment and got to improve their asset management plan using condition assessment information. So just a little bit of history behind Peel region. There's 3 major cities that are part of Peel: Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon. And I actually live in Mississauga, right up here in the top corner. That's where we had the snow this morning. So for any of you that miss snow, you can come live in Mississauga and you'll get snow in May. Little known fact is that Peel region is actually the third largest water utility in Canada. They service almost 1.4 million people. Only City of Toronto and City of Montreal have a bigger population base served with their distribution systems. If you look at just the distribution pipes, there's about 2,500 miles of pipe, varying in size from 2 to 16 inch. We're excluding their transmission and feeder main system. They also have about 300 to 400 kilometers of transmission and feeder main, but we're concentrating here on the water distribution network. It's a really new system. If you look at the development in Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon, it's very recent, within the last 25 to 30 years, and predominantly it's all PVC mains. But if you look, they still have about 12% of their distribution mains, or about 315 miles, that are older metallic mains, ranging in size from 6 to 12 inch. And if you look at their historical issues with leakage and breaks and issues, it deals with those older metallic pipes. So they know they had to put a program together to renew, replace, or make informed decisions on what to do with their older metallic mains. So in Peel, they've adopted the State of Good Repair program. Many municipalities have adopted a State of Good Repair program. It's developed by the Good Roads Association here in Canada, and a lot of them are following the best practices in those particular guides. If you look at traditional timelines associated with the types of pipes that they have in the ground, they figure that they have about a 10 to 15 year remaining service life span. Doesn't mean that it's their actual useful life, but just based on age, they have about a 10 to 15 years plan. So over the last I would actually say over the last 7 years, the region has been very aggressive at replacing mains. They replace about 9 to 12 miles of mains per year, and are planning to replace all of the remaining metallic mains over the course of the next 20 years. So they knew the bad mains in the first couple of years, but they noticed that in the last years, they were starting to replace mains that maybe didn't really need to be replaced. So they were looking at their current matrix, and their matrix is totally based on a desktop analysis. So the 4 key parameters that they look at is pipe age. We saw that pipe age is not maybe the best indicator of pipe condition. They use a break frequency. So if a segment of pipe has seen more than 4 breaks since it's been installed, it's automatically lumped into high rating for replacement or renewal program. Obviously, hydraulic limitations and pipe criticality play into it, and whether the cities are also planning to do adjacent utility renewals for storm and sewer. But no, they've never had any actual evidence-based data on the condition of the pipes to make their decision. So as they started pulling out pipe that was actually in good condition, they knew that they had to look into something to help improve their decision-making matrix, and they had to bring some real condition assessment information into the mix. So they did a market research out there of what was available for smaller diameter mains, and decided to do a pilot with the acoustic wave methodology from Ecologics. So for those of you that are not familiar with acoustic-based pipe assessment methodology, it's really based on the correlation methodology from leak detection. So as you know, when leaks or flows or noise is induced in a pipe, it actually vibrates the pipe material and actually creates little acoustic compression waves in the water that compress and decompress as it moves down the water. And it will actually flex the pipe material at a microscopic level. And those are the vibrations that we're picking up with our correlators to be able to pinpoint leak locations. But if you take this principle, and again, when we do correlations, it's based on average velocity tables for average pipelines. But if you look at a pipeline that's brand new, if you've got a new metallic pipeline, it's very rigid, it's thick, it's got its full hoop structural strength. So it's going to resist that acoustic wave being propagated down that particular pipe. But as a pipe degrades, it corrodes, it graphitizes, it starts losing effective thickness, and the actual structural thickness that remains is a lot less. So now it will flex a lot more to the acoustic wave that travels through that particular pipe. And if you're able to measure those waves, you're able to determine the amount of degradation, because an acoustic wave will travel much faster in a brand new pipe than it will in a slower pipe. So that is the principle behind the acoustic wave methodology for determining remaining wall thickness. So the setup is very similar to a normal correlation setup. So we set up our transmitters on two connection points here. It's demonstrated by connecting to fire hydrants. The only difference now is we are inducing noise into the pipe. So by activating a fire hydrant, either by flowing a small flow from the fire hydrant or tapping on the fire hydrant, we're actually inducing an acoustic wave into the pipeline. And we're able to measure the velocity of that wave between the two sensors. And by measuring that wave and comparing it with material property principles of water and the metallic pipelines, we're able to determine the average remaining wall thickness on that segment D between the two connecting sensors. So if we look at a pipeline that's degrading, obviously as metallic pipeline ages in the ground, it can corrode from two ways, from the inside of the pipe or the outside of the pipe. On the outside, the soil, the corrosivity of the soil will act on the outside of the pipe. And as it corrodes, it'll start to graphitize, maybe longitudinal cracks will form. And that graphitized material is non-structural. So it has no impact on keeping water in the pipe and influencing the wave speed of acoustic waves in that water through the pipeline. Tuberculation, again, will cause potentially corrosion from the inside of the pipe. But again, tuberculation is non-structural. It might affect the propagation of how far the noise will travel, but it will have no impact on the velocity of the wave that travels through that particular pipe. So the only thing that dictates the speed of the wave through the pipeline is the remaining structural thickness that's shown here in the dark gray band. So what we measure is an average pipe wall thickness between the two sensor links with ePulse. One of the key benefits of this methodology is we're also doing leak detection at the same time. Obviously, when we set up our equipment, we do a baseline measurement before inducing noise. And by doing that baseline measurement, if there's any pre-existing leaks between the two sensors, we're able to localize that leak, get the acoustic signature report it back to the utility for repair, but we're also able to still induce noise in most cases and be able to do our structural analysis, acoustic analysis, even though there's might be a leak in that particular pipe segment. This is a typical setup. It's not in Peel region. This one's actually in St. John's, Newfoundland. But you can see here that our two sensors are actually set up on valves. We've got an average about 400 or 500 feet distance between the sensors. And this is the pipe segment that we're analyzing. We're creating our acoustic noise here. It's traveling down the pipe, and we're measuring the speed of sound as it travels down the pipe. What's interesting about this project in St. John's is this 4 or 5 miles of pipe that we did for them, they had already earmarked to do structural rehabilitation of these mains. They were trying to prioritize which streets to do first, and that's why we were in doing the condition assessment. When we were done, we had determined that the average pipe wall loss was 73% in these pipes. So there wasn't much left. When we found several leaks as we were doing the acoustic thickness measurement survey, and the city actually changed their scope from doing structural lining to doing full pipe replacement, because with that limited amount of pipeline left, they figured they'd get better bang for the buck, spending a bit more money and doing a full replacement, but they'd get a brand new system and a longer life out of that system. So again, the information helps gauge the right rehabilitation methodology to go forward. We represent the information in a couple of bands. This is our typical bands, but we can customize the bands based on the requirements of the utility. But typically we look at 10% wall loss as being good pipe that can probably be deferred. When you get into the 10 and 30% is your moderate range, you want to monitor those. When you've got a 30% wall loss, then you've got some significant corrosion in that particular pipeline, and the utility should start considering what they should be doing on those particular pipelines based on the criticality and the location of it. This is a typical table that we generate, and of course we generate GIS files and link it back to GIS asset IDs so that the utility can generate maps and graphical information. It's applicable on cast iron, ductile iron, all metallic types of mains. It's also applicable on asbestos cement and also reinforced concrete pipes such as PCCP and the C301 and C303 types of pipes. Typical distances between sensor points is about 400 to 500 feet. And we do have about a minimum of about 175 to a maximum of 800 feet when we do these particular surveys. It is very well validated. There's been over 133 validations, independent validations run by our customers. So they've exhumed pipe and verified the remaining thickness. You can see there's a very strong correlation. There's actually a 95% correlation, R squared of 0.9 in the data that we measure out in the field. So we give very accurate data, and you can rest assured that you can make some wise decisions moving forward with that particular data. So if we look at the Peel region case study, they did an initial trial of 10 miles of pipe, and they really picked and choosed. They looked at pipes that were already earmarked for replacement, so the decision was already made, they were going to replace it. They just wanted to verify they were making the right decision. They picked neighborhoods that had varying break frequencies, even though the pipes were of the same material and the same vintage. There were varying pipe break frequencies in the same neighborhood. They picked pipes that had no history of breaks or very little failure history. And then they did a mixture of cast iron and ductile iron pipe, which is what they have in their remaining metallic water main stock. All of the water mains that we tested were 6 and 8 inch, because that's primarily what's left in their distribution system. So we took the 10 miles of pipe, looked at it via their GIS information, broke it down into segments. We ended up doing about 133 segments, averaging about 400 feet per segment. The field testing was done in 3 weeks. So we averaged about 3,300 feet, or about 2/3 a mile to 3/4 of a mile per day is what we tend to survey out there. And then there's the whole analysis. Yes, it was done in February, and as you can see, we can have snow in May, but we were still able to do this field testing in February. What's key with our testing is we really don't need a tremendous amount of help from the operations staff, so we're not a big burden on the operations staff. I believe in the 3 weeks that we were out in the field, we needed operations staff to come out twice, and it was mainly to make sure we were locating the valves properly. And then a couple of valves also needed to be cleaned, so we got a nice clean access with our acoustic sensor. So really the impact on operations is really minimal. What was key is that no excavations were needed to test all of these pipes. There was never any disruption to service, and we never needed to insert any tools into the pipe. Everything was done from the external connecting to existing valves and hydrants in the distribution system. This is one table that was generated, and you can see the level of information that we provided Peel. We linked it back to their GIS asset, the street, the distance, the nominal, what we measured as a remaining thickness, and the percentage wall loss, so that they could rate and prioritize the streets. This was then transferred into a GIS layer for them to see visually also. So of the 10 miles that we assessed, 74% of it was in the moderate condition, 20% of it was in the poor condition, and about 7% was in the good condition. So the actual pie chart kind of matched what Peel anticipated. But what they were able to see is there's a big proportion of pipes that are just about to go over that 30% into the poor threshold. So they know they've got a wave of pipes coming, so they can look at how to budget properly for their renewal program with this particular breakdown of information. What's a little more interesting is when we broke it down between materials. If you look, the cast iron, so all of the good pipe, the 7% of good pipe, all of it was in the cast iron part of it. So that was a little bit surprising to them, a little less to us. We kind of anticipated some of that. There's a lot of old, really old, thick cast iron pipe that's still in really good condition out there and may not need to be replaced. So that's where the age comes into play. It's not necessarily always based on age. But what was even more interesting to Peel when we dove into the data, we then plotted the data of percentage wall loss to age of pipe. And lo and behold, there is no correlation. So again, age is not the best factor. Just because a pipe's old doesn't mean it needs to be replaced. So that matches the WSSC data that I showed a little earlier on in the presentation. What was also interesting to them is that pipes that were identified to be replaced in 2019, a good proportion of them was actually in the moderate condition. So it didn't necessarily need to be replaced right now. I mean, they still went ahead and replaced it, but it could have been deferred a few years because there are other pipes that should have been prioritized in front of these. One key thing was we did find pipe that was in poor condition that had no or little break information. So there wasn't many leak events in those particular pipes, but they were definitely in poor condition. So they would have never have been identified with the current model that Peel was using to prioritize these to be replaced. Again, as I mentioned, none of the DI pipe fell in the good condition range. So again, just to conclude, the Peel in doing this study, they did identify that maybe their algorithm needs to be improved. So maybe bringing in more advanced software, maybe using machine learning algorithms might improve their initial model assessment to prioritize pipes that might need condition assessment. They did prove that the acoustic velocity testing was very easy to implement, that there was very little impact to operations, and obviously no impact to the residents and the customers. The results were easy to interpret according to their engineering team, and it made for much easier decisions on their pipe renewal programs. One key item that they benefited is in doing the 10 miles of pipe, we did locate 3 leaks, including 2 full circumferential breaks. Locations were pinpoint accurate, and Peel were very impressed with the accuracy at which we can locate the leaks. And even though these leaks occurred, we were still able to get condition information on those segments of pipes. If you look at the cost of inspection is about 1.9% of the pipe replacement costs. Obviously, pipe replacement costs will vary quite a bit across North America, but for Peel, it's a very low cost to go get evidence-based information to help prioritize their pipe renewal program. And now they are incorporating this information into their decision support system, and will continue to do so and link it back to GIS to improve their capital improvement program and their asset management program going forward. So hopefully that was interesting to you. I think I'm pretty much on time. There's about 10 or 15 minutes left, and I'll put it over to Melanie.
Thank you, Alan. If you'd like to sharing your screen, then we can see you better. We already have some questions here for you. Hi, Alan. When you talk about using AI and ML for predictive failure analysis, you mentioned data. What type of data are used and how is it gathered? Thanks.
Well, the utility data that we're looking for, obviously, we're looking for pipe information. So if you have a GIS-based system, we would like it to have the pipe material type, the year of installation, any historical break information you may have within your distribution system, pressure information if you do have it. So whatever's available in your GIS database, we can work with it. But as a minimum, we need pipe material type, we need a year of installation, and we need a break history. The other information that we use is publicly available data for your utility. So we'll go out for public data sources to get that data. And then the rest is proprietary information that we use to, I guess, do the recipe and come out with the pipe information. So hopefully that answers the question.
That's perfect. Alan White is asking, the LLF needs to be balanced with cost of failure, not just leakage, but other costs?
Yeah, so what the model does, the machine learning Pipe Insights does, is actually it uses the information to determine likelihood of failure. It has a module to do consequence of failure, and that's where your costs come in. So this is totally done by the utility. So you can customize your costs, your ratings for your consequence of failure. And then it will take the likelihood of failure that was determined by the software with your a consequence of failure information, your cost information, marry the two together, and then prioritize your pipes based on that information.
Thank you.
Oh, Melanie, I think you're... I think Melanie's internet connection's down. I have the chat open. I'm going to read the next question. If the pipe is lined, does that affect your results? That's a great question. Obviously, if it's been, I'm assuming you're talking about some kind of a structural lining. Obviously, if it's been structurally lined, we cannot, we haven't calibrated our acoustic velocity measurement for a structurally lined pipe. Obviously, it's already been rehabilitated, so we haven't seen a need for us to retest a lined pipe. But if you've got cement lining that's been done on a piping, we can do real assessment of that if you have the thickness information that was specified for that cement lining. So if you, I don't know if anybody caught on, but the information or the slide that I put with the table in the presentation from the Peel region, it was iron pipe, and it was class 52 ductile iron pipe. Well, class 52 ductile iron pipe comes with a cement lining on the inside. We know the thickness based on the AWWA manufacturing requirements for that class of pipe. So what our acoustic and material engineers do is they actually convert that equivalent cement lining thickness into an equivalent structural equivalent of metal pipe. So we can actually, if your pipeline's been relined with cement, we can do the same thing. But if it's been structurally relined, no, we haven't been able, or we haven't had a need to develop our assessment tool for that.
Okay, now I'm back. I think I lost my connection. We've got another question here from Mohsen Jalili. The algorithm supposes that the pipe thickness is only reason for pipe replacement. Is it right assumption? I think the word is assumption.
No, it's not the only thing. We give you that information, but there's a lot of firms that we work with that take the pipeline thickness information and then do a internal loading, external loading analysis, because there are other factors than just pipe thickness. So a pipeline that's lost 30% of its thickness, but has a low, is under low pressure with low loading condition versus a pipeline that's lost 30% thickness that is on a very busy street with substantial loading, more freeze-thaw cycles. Obviously, the failure will be much faster on that particular pipeline. But it's not the only information that needs to be assessed, but it's part of the information that needs to be assessed.
Perfect. Alan White is asking, in Europe, they use an indicator called the IVI, which looks at the histogram of value to replace pipes and try to plan replacement to make the cost of the capital investment plan. Is as close the same amount year by year. That means no big CIP budgets. Do you have any comments? I
think, Alan, that is where you can customize the consequence of failure. What we're looking at is to help. You added the comment of flattening the curve of the pipe replacement. We've all heard that term far more than we want to hear in the last couple of months, but it is true for pipeline replacement. We're looking to flatten that particular curve. So the information can be used to prioritize your capital improvement budget. That is what Peel is doing right now. So they're trying to figure out, they've made the decision that they want to replace the metallic pipeline in their system over the next 20 years. They just need to know what they need to allocate and how quickly. Do they need to spend more in the first 5 years, or is it in the middle years that they need to spend? So I'm not familiar with the European IVI assessment that you're talking about, but each utility will need to use the information that we provide them to build their own capital improvement plan assessment and help plan for their long-term capital budget. But again, if you remember that inverted pyramid, we're just trying to get enough information for the utility to be able to do exactly that, put together a long-term plan.
Okay, he's saying no, Nancy, thank you. I can send it to you so you can talk later about it.
I would love to get that, Alan. Yes.
Any more questions? Julian, would you like to say something, or we can just call it?
Just thank you very much, Alain. I think that was extremely detailed, very interesting, different case studies. Thanks very much. It will be up on YouTube for people to have a look at later on as well. So with that, I'll just say thanks, and I thought it was a real good session. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. It was my pleasure.
Thank
Okay,
you,
stay
Alan.
safe.
Thanks, Melanie. Thanks, Julian, for hosting.
Okay, thanks. Stay safe.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.